Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for The Call to the Wild. And what The Call to the Wild is essentially about is we center on this dog named Buck, and he is basically this dog living in this very uppity and very high-class countryside manor. You can tell that he has a lot of restrictions. He is someone that's very rebellious, and he's a very adventurous dog and things like that, and this caused him to get into trouble quite often. But one day he is captured by this basically by this group, and eventually he finds his way to the character of John Thornton, played by Harrison Ford, and in doing so he also meets this pack of dogs, and basically Buck, through this discovery, starts to find his true calling and starts to realize what his true purpose was all along, and that's really all I'm going to say. So, The Call to the Wild overall, I wasn't really that excited for this. This to me looked like a very generic and overly cheesy film, and one that I just didn't think was really going to work all that well, not just because of the obvious reasons, which, we'll get into later on, but just the story itself wasn't really interesting me, and it just seemed like one of those movies where I just did not think it was really going to work overall. And I will say right now, The Call to the Wild is a much better movie than I thought it was going to be, because I honestly thought this was going to be really boring overall. I was not expecting much of anything from this. But it still is a very average movie that is severely weighed down by by quite a few choices in the film that do unfortunately bring this down. But we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And when it comes to the actual cast of this movie, there isn't a lot to talk about. There's a lot of actors I like in this film, but out of everyone, there really is only one that I think is really worth noting very much at all, and that is Harrison Ford. And look, this is what I will say about Harrison Ford. Though he's not the main character of this movie, he's easily the best part of this movie, for sure. Whenever he comes on the screen, the movie is so much more energetic, the movie is so much more fun, it goes by a lot more faster, you care more about what's going on, and Ford just radiates so much fun on the screen. And even a movie like this, where he is interacting with a CGI dog, you can just tell how much fun, how much effort he is putting into this role. And I was very impressed by that, because this is a role where you really could half-ass it if you wanted to, but Ford really does go for it, and I was very surprised to see that here. I don't know why, because Ford is such a fantastic actor in that way, but he did a really excellent job here. I was very impressed by his performance within this film. I thought that he far and away was the best part of this movie, and I really did like what he brought to the table here, for sure. Now, in terms of the rest of the cast, unfortunately, I can't really say the same for them, because I'm not saying actors here like Gillan and Bradley Whitford are bad here, really, but they just don't really have a lot to do. Omar is in this movie for a while, and his role just really consists of him yelling a lot and being excited about what these, sled dogs can do. There just isn't really a lot. It's a very reactionary role in that way. So again, I don't really think any actors are bad. And then we get to Dan Stevens, who, look, Dan Stevens is an actor I respect quite a bit. You guys know I really do love Dan Stevens as an actor. I think he's one of the best character actors out there right now. I think that he is always consistent in pretty much everything. And so it's very surprising for me, but I have to say, Dan Stevens is honestly really bad in this movie. I don't know what he's trying to do here. He's really hamming it up as this very almost cartoony villain who I just could not stand at all. He's easily the worst part of this entire movie. Anytime he came on screen, it took me out of it immediately. It was the opposite of Harrison Ford, where he just weighs down the movie whenever he comes on, and I just couldn't really stand him at all. Other than him, most of the cast here is fine. They do what they need to do. Nobody's on the level of Ford, but most of them aren't on the level of Stevens either. So it pretty much does even out in the way, and that's really what I can say about the acting here overall. But now let's get to the directing and the writing, because I have to say, the directing was really the thing I was most excited for, because this is a director I highly respect. Chris Sanders is such a fantastic director. He has proven time and time again that if you need someone to, do a film that involves humans and animals bonding, this is definitely the guy to do it. I mean, this is the guy that gave us Lilo and Stitch. He directed that film. He directed the first How to Train a Dragon. He did the screenplays for Aladdin, Lion King, and Beauty and the Beast. This guy is a fucking legend. And so, knowing that he was behind this film, that was the main thing I was very excited for. And I do have to say, I think his directing is overall really good here. Are there times where it definitely does feel a bit like a live-action cartoon? Yes, but I think he's still able to bring the fun, bring the heart to this film, and I was overall impressed by his directing here. I don't think that's at all the problem with this movie. I really didn't have many complaints at all there. I thought that he did a really good job helming this film. I thought that his directing was very strong here, and I honestly kind of wish that he was the one that wrote it as well, because you really do feel his touch throughout this entire movie. There's never really a moment in terms of the character of John Thornton and Buck bonding that feels inauthentic. It feels like a very real relationship, and a lot of that is due to Sanders' directing, who just really knows what he's doing, and I was definitely very impressed by that. I was really worried that the translation from animation to live action, because this is the first live action thing he's ever done, was going to be readily apparent, that the main issue was going to be that it just did not translate well, but gratefully that's not really the problem at all. The problem with this movie is more of the writing. The story here, look, there are some things that I do think work very well. Like I said, when the movie is focusing on John Thornton and Buck, the movie is actually not too bad. A lot of this is due to the fact there actually is some depth given to the John Thornton character, which really did surprise me. I was very surprised that this is a character that actually does have a backstory. There is considerable depth given to him. He does actually have a bit of a character arc in the movie, and I thought that his character was actually really interesting. I liked what they were doing with him. I liked where he was going as a character. You can see why his character needs someone like Buck in his life, how it turns his life around. I thought they did a really excellent job with that. The problem is, this movie is not about John Thornton. It really is about the character of Buck, and when your main character is this fake-looking CGI dog, it's very hard to connect to really anything else that's going on. And any time it's not focusing on him, the movie is just not very interesting at all. Like I said, for a very long period of time, Buck is with Omar and Cara characters, and these guys could not be more disposable and boring than they are in this movie. I found them to be just so bland in this movie. There wasn't really anything to them, and I didn't really feel like they went really anywhere with their characters. They didn't really do anything that interesting with them. Bradley Whitford as well. He's just the authoritative sort of, he's the patriarch of the family who reprimands Buck a lot and doesn't really do much else than that. So the characters here just aren't really all that interesting. And Buck as a character, I'm not going to say isn't interesting, it's hard to connect with him, not just because of the CGI, which, we'll get into. You just don't really care about Buck as a character. His whole backstory is really rushed. He very quickly gets taken away, and you just don't really feel as, you just don't feel as connected to him as I feel like you could have been. I think they definitely made a mistake there. But also, like I said before, Dan Stevens' character has absolutely no place in this movie whatsoever. I don't know what they're trying to do with him, but anytime he showed up, I was like, why are you in this movie? Why do you still need to be here? Like, we have this, there's an emerging threat in this movie in the form of these other dogs that are clashing with Buck. Just have them be the villain in the movie. Why do you need Dan Stevens? I didn't really understand the point of him. Anytime he came in here, he just was so goofy, and hamming it up, and no one else in the movie is really like that. No one else in this movie is really well, maybe Karen Gillan. Karen Gillan has a very over-the-top role in that way, but it's a very quick one. Nobody is really playing this almost monstrous character in the way that Dan Stevens is, and it's not just his acting, it's the writing as well. Just is not good for this character, and I really couldn't stand him in this movie. So yeah, the writing is very much a mixed bag for me. When it's focusing on, like I said, John Thornton, it's pretty solid. But everything else, it really does fall flat. But of course, now we come to the most obvious issue. The CGI here is just really not good in this movie. You can tell pretty much from the first scene that's not a real dog. The way he's acting, and not just the look, the way he acts, the way he carries himself, he doesn't act like a real dog. He acts like a cartoon in a Disney movie, and it just isn't really working in that way, and it's especially apparent when it's him and these other dogs that he stumbles upon. It's honestly really hard to watch. It was giving me major, like, Lion King vibes, and look, I will say this, they're far more expressive than Lion King, but it's expressive in the sense where, like, it just doesn't really work because they're not acting like they should. You know, I kind of felt like, why couldn't you just have gotten a real dog? Like, yes, the situation that this dog is in, I get it. There's a lot of danger going on. You don't want a situation like A Dog's Purpose. But at the same time, I didn't really understand why we needed a CGI dog. It felt like a very lazy decision to me, and it honestly is going to hurt them because the movie's not doing that well financially, and a lot of that is due to the fact that they threw all this money into the CGI recreations of these dogs, and I just did not think there was any reasoning for that whatsoever. I thought it was highly unnecessary. That being said, the cinematography itself, the CGI notwithstanding, is gorgeous here. There's so many beautiful, like, landscape shots. When Buck is with Omar Sy's character, those are some of the most beautiful looking scenes in the whole movie. The movie is always delivering in terms of location, and I think that's something that everyone is going to be able to agree upon, even if you don't like this movie. The cinematography is absolutely gorgeous and constantly kept me in to what was going on. And John Powell's score, I thought, was also really good here. It was the perfect mix of being powerful, but not too powerful. Not to the point where it feels like it's manipulating your emotions. Like, it felt like the perfect score to this movie, and I really did like what Powell did here. In terms of the editing, like I said, I think this film was definitely way too short. I think that the way it goes about things, especially when it comes to Harrison Ford, who doesn't really play that big of a role into this movie until, really, I would say, the last 40 or 50 minutes. Before then, it's a lot of, we'll go to Harrison Ford for a little bit, but then he'll go back to someone else. He doesn't really stay with Harrison Ford until those last 40 minutes of the movie, and I think if another hour was given, the film could have been even more powerful in that way. The way the movie ends, especially, it felt a little too abrupt, the way they did wrap things up there. I don't think they did as good of a job with that, and I do think that did weigh the movie down for me. Overall, Call of the Wild is pretty average. I think there's a lot of things here that do work. Harrison Ford is really great. Chris Sanders' directing is very strong. The cinematography and the score is also really powerful. There's a really good backstory for John Thornton's character, but for everything that works, there's something that doesn't, with Dan Stevens or with the CGI and things like that. Those things just really took me out of the movie a lot. But again, those last 40 minutes I thought were legitimately good. I was legitimately getting into what was going on, and so overall, I can say that The Call of the Wild was a better movie than I was expecting. This is not by any means a boring movie. There are definitely parts that are boring, but it's definitely not a boring film. It's for sure better than most of these, live action live action type remakes that we've been getting lately. It definitely seems, it's definitely a lot better for sure than a lot of these unnecessary remakes that Fox is going to go about making, or I'm sorry, 20th Century Studios is now going to be remaking. I think it's definitely better for sure, but at the same time, I do still feel there was a lot that it could have done better, and so because of that, overall, I am going to give The Call of the Wild a C+. But over, guys, in my review, The Call of the Wild, let me know what you guys saw this movie overall, lift your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.